Joining me in the studio today is Dr. Andrew Power from the Australian Centre of Hypnosis. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, many gamers scoff at the idea of video game addiction. So where do you draw the line between being a video games addict and an enthusiast?
Well, to answer that question, you really need to look at the difference in the words. With enthusiasts, of course, the basis of that word is enthusiasm. Yes. It's quite all right to enjoy the game. If you think of a golfing enthusiast, it's somebody who likes to go out every now and then and play the game. The clinical drawing the line, so to speak, when it comes to addiction, and addiction, by definition, is a habit-forming psychological or physical occurrence. Now, the way that I'd like to explain this to people who come to see me for addictions is Lord of the Rings. They have a certain character called Sméagol. Sméagol is a ring addict. I know that doesn't sound good for the camera, but he will go to the ends of the earth, so to speak, for his addiction. In the end of the movie, of course, he jumps into lava. So he does actually die for his addiction. Now, an addiction becomes a problem when if you take that particular habit away from them or that stimulus away from them, it will cause a trauma or physical or mental or emotional stress.
In your experience, how long has video game addiction been a concern in Australia? I mean, we often hear about cases in China and Korea, especially in the media.
From my experience, it's becoming more and more prevalent with more and more online gaming, such as World of Warcraft. It used to be, look, as long as there's been video games, there's always been people who have kind of loved it, and there have been people who have been a little addicted to getting the highest score and keeping it that way back to Pac-Man. But in a clinical sense, people can often walk away from Pac-Man a lot easier than something that involves all the senses and stimulus like World of Warcraft. Now, I'm not particularly targeting World of Warcraft. However, over the last 3 years, the percentage increase of those people who are coming to see me for that game in particular, as well as EverQuest and some of the other games, seems to be on the increase.
You mentioned World of Warcraft, but is there a certain type of game that draws people into these addictive sort of habits?
Certainly. Look, it really does depend on the person and their own behaviours. There was a quote once said to me, which is every single person alive has their own personal crack pipe, which means everybody has something that they prefer, and some people who go a little overboard with that. They have found that MMORPGs, the online role-playing games, are the ones that seem to be getting more and more people addicted to it simply because it plays on the different senses. It involves, the audio, the stimulus. You get the kinesthetic feeling because you're part of a group and you've got the emotional rush as you're attacking things. However, on top of that, when they were developing these games, they also consulted psychologists who then also talked about reward systems and playing at the core human emotional needs and fulfilling those via the game.
So, of course, some experts are quick to blame games for video game addiction. Would you consider this to be correct, or is it simply human condition?
Look, I would say yes and no. To some degree, the gamers, these games companies, they're in business to make money. That's the end of the story. World of Warcraft, look, they've created a brilliant money maker. And, World of Warcraft in 2005 had 4.5 million players. Today, they've got around the 11.5 million players at $15 a month, give or take, that's US dollars. They're pulling in about $172 million a month. So they're in the business for money. So it serves them to make the job as appealing and make the game as appealing as possible to get more and more people into it. Now, when you apply things like targeting human needs and emotions and getting people who are very easily addicted to things, of course, there's going to be a natural group that will just naturally go to it, like bees to honey sort of thing. The problem, however, and experts will like to blame games, but the problem is, at the end of the day, every addiction relies on the person who's suffering it. If you don't take responsibility for your own position and the own circumstance, then you should be, checked at first.
So that takes us to the treatment. How do you treat video game addiction? Is it the same as treating a addiction to cigarettes or gambling? Well,
at its core, yes. You need to accept the problem and that there is a situation first. Now, that comes back to the first question about the enthusiast and the addiction. If you take the game away from somebody, do they go through the physical or the mental, emotional withdrawals? And if they're finding themselves in a position where they're at school or at work, and this does apply to adults as well, and they're thinking about what they're going to do next or what they did and what they should have done, and they're really that focused on it, and they find their thoughts just keep going back to it, then that does suggest they've got a problem. The first step of treatment is always sort of assessing whether there is a problem. Sometimes parents might think there is a problem and go overboard, and sometimes there really is a problem and they're not even noticing it. So you need to notice the problem before you can start to treat it.
Okay, and where do you go from there? Someone accepts they have a problem.
They need to seek somebody who can counsel them or has experience in dealing with addiction therapy. There are therapists out there that don't deal with addiction therapy. Not every therapist is the same. So you do need to go and see a specialist if you do think you do have a problem, and they will certainly do the assessment to find out whether or not you have a problem and how severe it is.
Okay, so of course, being from the Australian Centre of Hypnosis, obviously hypnotherapy is what you deal in, but are there other paths?
Well, certainly, I'm also a cognitive researcher and a cognitive therapist by trade, and I was that before a clinical hypnotherapist. The reason I moved into hypnotherapy is because it's the quickest way to get the results, and people always want things fast in this day and age.
Yes.
That's why technology is as it is. Now, I basically use a combination of cognitive therapy as well as counselling and hypnotherapy. And I've had clients come to me for completely unrelated issues. For example, I had one corporate businessman. He came to me because he had an alcohol addiction. He was drinking a bottle or two of wine a day, and it was affecting his life. Yeah. And it was through the therapy process that he said, I come home, I sit down, I have my wine, and I play World of Warcraft. And the funny thing was, every time he played World of Warcraft, he would drink wine. Whenever he didn't play World of Warcraft, he was only a social drinker with family and friends.
So his real problem was he was addicted to World of Warcraft.
He was addicted to World of Warcraft, and the interesting thing was, after brief therapy with him, he made his own realisation that he did have a problem with World of Warcraft. He sold his World of Warcraft account, because you can sell them and delete them. Most often, an addict who realises that they've been caught in the web, so to speak, will usually delete or remove their characters so they can't go back to them. And what he did was he sold his World of Warcraft account, and I spoke to him a month after that. He hadn't had a single glass of wine since. I spoke to him a year after treatment, and he said that he'd only had about 3 or 4 glasses over the year with his friends and family, and he had somehow broken his alcohol addiction simply by changing the pattern that he'd fallen into.
Do you have any other examples of video game addiction that you've personally come across?
There's one in particular who is from America, because I do actually work internationally with people as well. And he dropped out of aeronautical university. He was a fairly bright chap. He dropped out of aeronautical university in order to basically play World of Warcraft full time, without the hassles of friends, family, and of course schoolwork.
Right, career and family all gone.
Yeah, he just turfed it out just so he could get some animated fulfillment. And after the initial intervention, he had a huge epiphany of what he had done. And it took everyone from his family and friends to gather there to say, listen, this is what's going on, before he had the epiphany. Some people aren't that lucky. Some people can go on with their addiction, and family and friends just figure, oh yeah, they're just a bit that way, and they leave them alone. And that can be often the worst possible scenario. And so with treatment with him, he actually deleted all of his accounts cold turkey. He didn't sell them or anything. He said, no, that's enough. He actually got quite angry at the game company, as a lot of parents and family do. Deleted all of his accounts, and last report I received was about a month ago. He's back in university. Thankfully, he kissed the right butt to get back into the university, and he's gone back on with getting his life in order.
Where do people go, whether it's family or people who have come to the realisation that they want to do something about it? What's their first port of call? Well,
I've put up some websites just purely with information. There's no sales pitch or anything like that. There's videogamingaddiction.com.au and onlineaddiction.com.au. You can go there, you can read out the step-by-step ways of identifying whether or not you have an addiction. Some people will often say that you've got an addiction, but you really do need to take time out and realise whether or not you do. I'm certainly not against video gaming. They do serve its purpose. For instance, they're proven that they help with cognitive recognition and training everything from children through to the military. So they do have their place. I'm not here to sort of bag games, but in moderation.
Absolutely. Great. Dr. Andrew Power, thanks for your time.
Thank you.